Hello everybody, welcome to Three House. This is another edition of Adulting 101. I'm Chef Drew here in the Three House kitchen. And today I'm going to continue with the theme that we started last time with kind of comfort foods. Things that are easy to make, but then variations you can do at home to make it kind of customize it to your own tastes. So growing up, my family had a lot of church cookbooks. A lot of the spiral bound paperback church cookbooks that my mom would get at potlucks and church sales and such as that. So I thought of that, and as I was looking through those, I noticed that a lot of the recipes basically had one formula, and they never varied except for maybe the ingredients or whatever. But this is a good basis, starting point for casseroles that you can make at home. It works every time as long as you stick with the right proportions. So the basic casserole that you start with calls for 1 cream of something soup. It's entirely up to you what you want to use. And of course, a cup of milk to go with that. A cup of instant rice. Some kind of mixed vegetable. In this case, I'm actually going to use mixed vegetables. This is for another recipe we're going to see here in a couple of minutes. And then some kind of ground meat or beef browned. So today I went with the vegetarian option. This is the Beyond Beef, which is the same brand as the Beyond Burgers. I'm familiar with Beyond Burger. I love Beyond Burger. This is actually my first time browning the chunk stuff. So it turned out pretty well. We'll see how the finished product ends up, but I was really happy with it as it goes. And then most people like to top their casseroles with the French fried onions. So as long as you stick with this option, you essentially mix everything up in one bowl. And for this one, since I used 2 cans of soup, I actually used 1 can of evaporated milk and 1 cup of regular milk. Do not get evaporated milk and sweetened condensed milk mixed up. Sweetened condensed milk is for desserts, like cheesecake and stuff. If you use this, you'll be just fine. Just don't make the mistake of buying the sweet condensed milk. So I used the evaporated milk because I wanted something a little bit thicker. I used a skim milk. One of the things I wanted to do today as well is just give you a healthier option. So as you'll notice, I used all the healthy choice soups. I didn't go too far out of the box. I just got the Campbell's, but I went the healthier option. A little less sodium, a little less fat. So I thought to make up for the skim milk, I just used one of these. So I've got everything mixed in here except for the rice. So this is mixed vegetables, the ground Beyond Beef. I used the cheddar soup and cream of celery. Like I said, you can use any cream of soup you want, cream of chicken. My family didn't really like the cream of mushroom, so I didn't use cream of mushroom in this recipe, but you certainly could. So the last thing we're going to do is add 2 cups of instant rice, or minute rice. Uncle Ben's happens to be what I'm using here. And I went with brown rice because it is a healthier option. And as it turns out, there just happens to be 2 cups in one of those boxes. This recipe is fairly forgiving. You can use anywhere from 1 to 1.5 cups of rice. If you want a little bit thicker, you can go with the 1.5. You can use a little less liquid if you want with this. If you want a little thicker, if you like it a little runnier, you can just add a little more. But I'm actually making a double batch here. Most of the recipes, you'll see if it's just cooking for 2 or 4, will just be 1 can of cream of something, 1 pound of ground meat browned, and 1 bag of vegetables. So to me, this looks like it's about the right texture. That rice is going to absorb a lot of that moisture, and it's going to thicken up. So I pre-sprayed my casserole, and I'm just going to dump that in here. And we're going to put that in a 350-degree oven for 45 minutes to an hour. As I said before, it is pretty forgiving. I would check it at about 35 to 45 minutes. Turn it if you need to, if your oven heats unevenly like mine does. But as you can see, if I'd used the smaller casserole, I would only need 1 of each, but I doubled up. I used 2 cups of rice, 2 cans, and I kind of just eyeballed the meat. So we're going to put this in the oven. And then when this is just about done, at about 35 minutes, when you take it out and look at it, if it's bubbling on the sides, it looks like it's done the way through, Then we're going to go ahead and add our French fried onions for the topping. So I'm going to start that, and then I'm going to show you how to make one essentially from scratch, and you can personalize it. So for those of you who watched last week, I made a milk gravy, or white sauce, that I started with a roux. For those of you who didn't watch, a roux essentially is equal parts of flour and an oil. Traditionally in French cooking that'd be butter, and some people use margarine, whatever, but I'm actually going to make a vegan version of this exact same dish. So I used olive oil instead of butter, so no dairy, and I used oat milk. And since I doubled the batch, I went with 6 tablespoons of olive oil, 6 tablespoons of flour, maybe more like 6.5, 7 tablespoons of flour, because I like a little bit of a thicker roux. And I used the oat milk. I used 2 cups of oat milk. I browned the flour with the oil. As soon as that started to bubble and the flour lost all of its white color and started to turn a little bit yellow, then I put in my oat milk and stirred, and I got a nice thick texture. While I was doing that, I also browned some carrots, celery, and onions, also in olive oil. And this mixture is called mirepoix in French cooking. It's the basics of a lot of French classic cooking. So I use this in almost all of my savory dishes and soups. And so I just cooked that down a little bit so the carrots were just beginning to get soft, because it's going to bake another 35 to 50 minutes in the oven. And then I also did some fresh portobello mushrooms that I sliced and browned in olive oil. So this is all vegan. I did 2 packages of the meat. So I've got a little bit of this left as well. And so instead of getting another bowl dirty, I'm just gonna combine everything in here, stir it together. But I'm gonna back up a little bit and show you, instead of using just regular brown rice, I wanted to make this a little more interesting. So we're gonna go with the rice and quinoa mix. It also is the instant brand, cooks in about 10 minutes. So once you put it in the casserole and bake it, it's gonna cook all the way through. We don't have to worry about any crunchy parts that didn't get cooked all the way through. And I've laid out here some of the basics that I use for spices. I personally like things very spicy, but I didn't put any in this particular recipe. That's there for you to see. But in the white sauce, I added a little bit of a vegan chicken substitute broth, just to bring a little bit of flavor to that cream sauce. And then I always use salt, pepper, and my 2 favorites are garlic and onion. Just like mirepoix that I use in almost all of my savory dishes, I always incorporate onion and garlic. To me, it's just part of my flavor profile. I don't always do the spicy stuff, but I think to need the body and to bring flavor to the dish. Otherwise, it's just gonna taste like bland gravy. This just brings another element to it. And I use a little bit of smoked sea salt to bring them with a little bit more flavor to the mushrooms and the meat. So we're just gonna go ahead and combine all the ingredients. So essentially what I'm doing by adding this white sauce or milk gravy to the vegetables, and then the mushrooms, I've essentially duplicated a cream of something soup. So we'll mix that all together. And if it's too thick, I could always thin it out with a little bit more liquid. I just want to make sure that I cook down the flour in the roux to make sure that it didn't taste raw. That looks just a little thick to me, but we're going to go ahead and go with it. Maybe add, just splash a couple tablespoons, stir it in. It's got a nice shimmer to it. This is actually also the first time that I've made a roux and used oat milk. I was keeping my fingers crossed that it was gonna thicken up just like regular milk, but it looks fine and I tasted it. I think it's beautiful. I don't know any reason why you couldn't use that. For those of you that are vegetarian or vegan out there, or have vegan friends. So now we're gonna add our meat. I should say meat substitute. This is the same, this is the Beyond Beef. This is a soy product. For those of you that don't want to go through the process of actually browning that, you can go to the frozen section of your store and they have the crumbles already browned. And so essentially the first version I showed you, you can just open everything up, dump it in here, take your crumbles, your rice, stir everything in one bowl, put it in a casserole and bake it. You don't have to do any cooking at all other than heating up your oven. So that's just a really easy way. That's your basic starting point. Some of you might want to start there before jumping anything more complicated. But some of you might say, well, you know, I've had this my whole life. I'm going to try something a little bit different. Maybe not step away too far, but still stick with the comfort food. Especially with the pandemic and people staying at home and maybe get nostalgic for some of that homemade food. This is a good place to start. So to this one, instead of the mixed vegetables, I'm gonna go with the low sodium green bean because I already have the mirepoix in there and the mushrooms.
Did you drain that?
I did, yes, I drained, and I used the low sodium variety.
Okay.
And I'm gonna splash just a little bit more milk in here, oat milk. And then I'm just gonna kind of fold it because I don't want to completely break those green beans up. I want them to still have a little bit of integrity. And then because this looks a little bit thicker than that last batch, I'm not gonna use the full 2 cups. I'm gonna use 1.5 cups. I also have more vegetables in this one than the other one. And another tip, make sure you know the difference between a liquid measuring cup and a dry measuring cup. And a recipe like this, that's as forgiving as I've said before, it's not gonna make that much of a difference, but if you're baking and you mix these up, they could throw everything off. So dry measuring cup, liquid measuring cup. Good indicator is usually that the liquid measuring cup has the spout, and they're almost always shaped like these, so just make sure you get those. So what do you know? One of these packets is roughly 1 cup. So we are going to live dangerously and just go ahead and put 2 packets in, stir it up, put it in the casserole dish and put it in the oven. Some of the other options I've seen in the cookbook are sometimes you use tomato soup instead of cream of something soup. And those are the ones usually they have the green beans and ground beef as their ingredients. So right now you can't really see the rice and stuff that's in there, but once that starts to absorb that liquid, that's gonna puff up and it's gonna form a nice casserole. Get that spread out evenly so that cooks evenly. And I'm gonna put that in the oven. And hopefully in about 35 to 45 minutes, we're gonna check this, make sure it's cooked, and then we're gonna put the crispy onion topping on. All right, I'll see you in a couple of minutes. Okay, we've got the French fried onions on top. I'm pulling out the second casserole now. The first one is the one with the mixed vegetables and the canned soups. And this one over here is the vegan with the homemade soup and mirepoix mix and green beans. You can see how it's bubbling around the outside. I think this is going to be perfect. Once again, I'm Chef Drew here at Three House with Adulting 101, and thanks for sharing my kitchen with me.